I finally found a surgeon in Mexico. So I had to leave the United States. I had to leave my life. There's this experimental surgery that I'm going to do. And it was a very hard surgery. So he was like, you need a living will because there's a possibility that I die on the table. There's a possibility that you won't be okay. So I had to face death, right? I had to make
Yes.
decisions. And I wasn't scared to die. And there was big contention in my family because nobody was willing to accept my decisions. I was like, if I'm not going to be okay, let me die. Like, don't keep me alive. And my family couldn't accept that, but I wasn't scared because of my.
Well, welcome back to the Rocking Midlife podcast. And I am thrilled today to have an incredible guest with me all the way from Texas. And I would like to welcome, with this beautiful name, Tatiana Miller. Hi, Tatiana. It's wonderful to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm really excited to get into this conversation today because we are going to be talking about reclaiming you, finding harmony through self care and well being. And I know you're going to find this one pretty powerful, particularly when you hear Tatiana's personal story, of which she just told me it's a major anniversary. So I'm going to let her tell you a bit about that. But before we do, let me tell you just a little bit about her. So, Tatiana is a psychologist and clinical health and stress management consultant. She's an expert in health, relationships, mindset, self care, nutrition, mindfulness, fitness, and productivity. My gosh, you do the whole list there. It's absolutely brilliant. She utilizes her emotional and mindset expertise to heal, and this is part of her story, to heal herself from being paralyzed after being told she would never walk again following a tragic car accident. So I think that's a perfect place to dive on in. And Tatiana, welcome. Please share your story. We would love to hear what's happened to you, what's got you to this point, and what you do now.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So, I was not. I want to clarify something that was in my bio. I was not in a car accident. My sister died in a car accident my
Oh,
first week of college. And that actually was a pivotal point that forced me to start looking into everything that we're talking about. And
mm,
it actually prepared me. Oftentimes we don't realize that obstacles, crisis, trauma, tragedies are actually gifts. If we can take and give ourselves the space, right, to take these nuggets that we gain of strength and of resilience forward. And my sister's death, she died in a tragic car accident,
how
was
awful.
what allowed me, yeah, it was what allowed me to not fear death, but also be able to face my paralysis with courage. I
Mm,
don't think that I would have been able to do that because fast forward that happened when I was 17 years old, and then when I was in my late 20s. So I started realizing that I had an autoimmune disease. So when I was a teenager, I started having a lot of health issues. But this is like almost 30 years ago. So we really didn't understand autoimmune and chronic pain that
mm-hmm.
long ago. So when I was a teenager, I started kind of getting shuffled around, from specialist to specialist. We don't know what's wrong. Maybe you're making it up. Are you sure you're feeling this? Because the tests aren't showing it. And so from 14 to 15 years old, I started questioning the signs that my body was giving me because I wasn't getting any validation, right? I wasn't being heard by
Mm.
the people that I was going to for help. And so then my sister passed away, and that helped me face, huge emotional obstacles. I started seeing a therapist that kind of led me into all of the holistic stuff. And I was having panic attacks. So she was like, why don't you try meditation? It'll help you with your panic attacks. And I started seeing this whole other way of living that gave me relief from the pain that I was having physically and emotionally from losing my sister. Life, could be different.
Mm.
And that's one of my, like, for people, like, there's always a different way, right? There's a different way from away from suffering, away from struggling. And then fast forward to I'm married, I have 2 babies. I'm 33 years old. So a lot of time has gone by. I finally have a diagnosis, but autoimmune diseases and chronic pain present differently with every human being. So you might have chronic pain in your shoulder that feels a certain way, and it's going to be mine. So at that point, I understood that I had an autoimmune disease, but I really didn't have clarity as to what it was doing in my body other than back pain. So all I knew is that I had lived most of my life from my teenage years till 33 with severe back pain. In my late 20s, I had had a really bad fall from a horse because I used to ride horses. And at that point, the doctors told me, something's wrong with your back. We don't know if it was the fall. We're not sure. And like many women, right, we ignore our
Oh,
symptoms to
yes,
take care
yes.
of others.
Yeah, put everybody else
And
first and just, yep.
it's never convenient to be in pain. And so I ignored it. I kept pushing through. I was for many years going to bed at night in tears from pain,
Mm.
but I thought this is just my life, right? This is just what I have to do. Fast forward to 33, I'm teaching a yoga class. I've done all the work of learning holistic medicine, of learning how to breathe, how to feel my body. I'm teaching a yoga class and I feel I demoed a twist. So I'm turning my body and I feel my legs coming out from under me. And before I hit the floor, and it's very interesting because I remember, and people will often tell you when there's a traumatic event that they have like this slow motion memory of it, of how you recall the event. And really, all I remember is me knowing this deep, deep knowing inside myself that as I'm falling, I'm like, I can't feel my legs. And so
How
I fall to the
frightening.
ground.
How absolutely frightening.
Yeah. And what is also very weird is that I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared. Now, 10 years later, in fact, I just told somebody because I'm doing this photo shoot on Thursday to commemorate my scar. I have a
Wow.
huge scar on my back.
Yes.
Um, reclaiming, right?
Mhm.
I thought I was going to get a tattoo, right, on my scar to celebrate. And I had this Tibetan scripture that I wanted to get on my back. And then I have my surgery and I'm going through rehab. And I'm like, was going to get a tattoo. Like, I'm too scared for that, And my
Oh,
husband's like, you went through this horrific event. You're tough. Like, you can do it. I'm like, no. So I'm going to do this picture for my 10-year anniversary. But I I wasn't scared. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize in these types of situations. It's that our soul is so powerful and it is so vibrant if we know how to tap into it, that it really puts you through these moments if you just allow yourself to lean in, which is what I did. There was never a time when I was going through this where I thought there was another way but to walk, because I had 4 surgeons tell me, like, "We don't think you're gonna be able to walk. You've lost all your
God.
reflexes on your left side." I had these trembles on my right side that I couldn't control because my nervous system was all messed up. My
Mm.
spine had, like, grown, pressing on my nerves. So I had a lot of things going on, and I never thought an option for me was to be paralyzed. It just never occurred to me. It was difficult and it was depressing and it was frustrating, but I wasn't scared. I was angry. I
Yeah.
was angry at the medical system, not at
Yeah.
myself, but at the medical system that wouldn't give me hope, basically. I found that I was just kind of told, "Oh, we can do 2 or 3 surgeries. We can put pigs parts inside of you and your body
Oh
might
gosh.
reject them." Like, I
Yeah.
was really given a lot of hope. My insurance in the United States refused to pay for my surgery. They said I needed pain management, and I was like, "I can't feel my leg. Like, what pain management do you want me to do?"
Oh my goodness.
So
It
I
sounds
think
just
that
as bad as here. We have these type of issues here as well, unfortunately. And my husband went through severe
yeah,
back surgery after nearly dying and was unable to walk, quite similar to what you're saying too. And he had his nerves were being pressed with the ruptured discs pressing against nerves and things like
yes.
that. And And the same thing, like that's the first time going through that was when we learned how much you have to advocate for yourself.
Like, I learned that it is a lonely journey.
Yes.
You reclaim yourself in any instance. And for me, in that instance, it was reclaiming my functioning, right? My physical ability to function. But I've learned that it is a lonely journey. People can support you, people can love you, but you have to really understand that it's your responsibility, right? You're accountable for it because I was the one that was going to have to live with it. I was the one that needed to navigate what was right for me. Um, I was the one that needed to make hard choices.
Mm, that's
That's
tough.
where I think the experience with my sister comes into play so powerfully is that I wasn't scared to die. They told me that my surgery, I finally found a surgeon in Mexico. So I had to leave the United States, I had to leave my life. There's this experimental surgery that I'm going to do and it was very, hard surgery, so he was like, "You need a living will because there's a possibility that I die on the table, there's a possibility that you won't be okay." So I had to face death, right? I had to make
Yes.
decisions, and I wasn't scared to die, and there was big contention in my family because nobody was willing to accept my decisions. I was like, "If I'm not gonna be okay, let me die, like, don't keep me alive," and my family couldn't accept that, but I wasn't scared because of my sister. I had peace that this was the best decision for me, and I go back 10 years later and think I would have made the same decision that I did back then. It's something that I stand very strongly for, and I know that everybody's different and that, their living wills and the decisions that they make, but I think that is part of claiming yourself, knowing what is best for you despite what your family wants you to do. I think those are really challenging things. And especially for women, because we want to think about everybody else. We want everybody else to be comfortable.
Oh, it's so true. You obviously came through that surgery, and would imagine the rehabilitation from that was quite a long time. So just fast forward. So you've got all this experience. You've basically faced one of the worst things that can happen with the loss of your sister. How has all that impacted what you do now? And who do you work with now?
So I'm a professor. I'm a big believer in helping the next generation. I had a student yesterday that said, you know, I'm so glad I took your class because now I'm helping my family, right? I had them do a project and I said, "Oh, you're a budding psychologist." And she said, "I wish everybody had to take this class is called lifespan development and everybody teaches it differently. I developed my own way of teaching it in my own curriculum, but it basically teaches people exactly what you're asking me, like how has your life made you who you are?
Yeah.
What do we want to take from it? What do we need to heal? What do we need to reclaim? What pieces of us have we left behind that really are true to our core? What parts of us were we told by our grandparents or our mom and dad that this is you? And you're like, "No, this isn't me. Like, I put it on because you told me, but it's not really me." And what parts of you have you not let come out? Maybe. And so I am a professor and I teach a course at the university. And then I call myself more of a coach than a psychologist because my thinking is that we have to meet people where they are, right?
Yeah.
The people that I work with are all ages from teenagers that get still referred to me for pain, chronic pain management. So I worked as a part of a pain team. That was one of my first roles after I recovered from my surgery. And I also want to reiterate to people like the hardest things in our lives are happening for a reason. We have to trust, right? So shortly after I recovered, I randomly came into an opportunity to create a program for a neurology department that was offered to the entire hospital. So any specialty, any patient that had pain could be a part of it for holistic modalities. And so I
Wow.
implemented meditation, yoga, and as a part of their therapy. And I found myself working with a lot of teenagers that had experienced similar things to what I experienced, tragic accidents, deaths, cancer diagnosis. And the program took off. It was recognized. It's one of the first of its kind. And I would have never been able to do that if I hadn't been through these super hard things because what made that successful were my experiences and my ability to connect with these patients and their needs from a pain, right?
Yes.
From a
Yes.
pain source.
Yes.
And I think with chronic pain and with disabilities, it's really difficult to really even understand what a person is going through unless you've experienced it, right? It's kind of like being a parent. My brother called me the other day and he was like, "Man, this is hard. Why didn't you send me?" And I said,
Because you wouldn't have got it. You just wouldn't have got it.
"I'm like, there's no way to prepare yourself for
Yeah.
parenting, right?" And so I think that what I do is just kind of I do a lot of praying. I'm like, God, please send me who needs my help and who I'm meant to be for. And a lot of people think that that's really crazy, but I have
No,
found
I
that
love that. I think that's really
every,
cool. Yeah.
every, yeah, every client I have is a mirror of me and I'm a mirror of them, from my teenage patients that I get for chronic pain to my, executive clients that are maybe 70. I think my oldest client is like 75. Um, and everything in between, right? So the people that come to me are people that are in a place of surviving in some aspect of their life. It could be career wise, it could be physical pain, some sort of pain, right? There's some sort of pain point that they know that there's another way or they want there to be another way. And I say I take them from surviving to thriving. And
Mm.
I teach, yeah, I my goal with my clients is to teach them what we just talked about, right? Everything happens for a reason. Why do I have these thinking patterns? How are they affecting me emotionally? How is that showing up physically? And so I mix a lot of the different things that I've studied holistic medicine, psychology, my own life experiences with trauma to do a lot of trauma informed type
Yes.
of care. Most of us never get tools and resources to deal with that. We just kind of one day wake up and we're sick.
The mind
One day
body connection is so powerful, isn't it? And experiences like trauma. I know there's more and more research coming out. And now, what's the doctor's name? Is it Dr. Gabor?
Matei, yes, Gabor
Thank you.
Matei. He's a
Yes.
yeah. I
Incredible.
actually yes, I use a lot of his research in my classes. He's
Yeah.
amazing, and he he is similar to what I did. Right? He at one point in his life he said, "I'm a terrible husband. I'm a terrible dad. I have all this anger inside of me." He was a practicing medical doctor, practicing MD, and he was like, "What we're doing is not working." And so he, to help himself and to better his relationships with his son and his wife, he started doing a lot of self reflection and then started doing research and
Hmm.
is one of the pioneers of saying, for years, I had to do a lot of what I call translating between Eastern and Western modalities.
They were very separate for a long time, weren't they?
Yeah. And they still are in a lot of people's minds because they don't understand what each one is for, right? One is for living a proactive life and one is for reacting.
Hmm.
Certainly, if I myself, I'm going to go to the emergency room and
Exactly.
get some stitches.
Yes.
Uh, but for my skin not to be dry, I'm going to put lotion on every day, right? So that's one, and then that's the other. So
Hmm.
one is for your daily life, for your habits, and one is for acute situations, crisis situations. And they both have a wonderful place in our lives. Talking about mind, body, and how they link together. So the doctor that did my surgery in Mexico, um, had been a doctor, I think, for like 45 years. He was like in his late 70s when he did my surgery, and he is now retired. But so I come out of my surgery, it was like 10 hours. I bled out. The hospital had to go on TV and ask for blood
Oh my
because I
goodness.
lost so much. It was very, very traumatic surgery. But I woke up and I started feeling very nauseous. And I knew because I'd worked in the hospital system that I was allergic to certain pain medications. So I told him, I said, "This is the pain medicine that you're giving me. And when you have back surgery, you cannot be throwing up because it forces
Hmm.
you to hurl
Yeah.
forward
Yeah.
to be slow." So I said, take me off the pain medication and I'm going to meditate. And he looked at me and he goes, what are you talking about? Like, this is the drug talking. Like, I don't even know what meditation is. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm not taking you off of the pain medicine. And my dad and my grandfather, who know me very well, they were like, she's kind of stubborn. Why don't we just give her a chance? Like, let's just try it for a couple hours and see if this works. So the doctor um, was good friends with my grandfather. And so really didn't understand what I was talking about, but my grandfather knew that I was stubborn enough to where he needed to give me a chance. So they take me off the pain medicine. A little while goes by. I put my headphones on. I start to do a meditation and I'm okay. I mean, it was painful, but it relaxed my nervous system enough to where it was bearable. I was able to rest. And so the doctor became very intrigued and he was like, you need to explain to me what just happened. Like, he was the doctor that developed the protocols for bullfighters. And so my uncle and my grandfather were bullfighters. That's how we knew this doctor. My uncle had been horned. He's one of the most famous horcados that ever existed. So he'd been stabbed by a bull many times.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so the doctor says to me, he's like, I've seen your uncle recover and you're a tiny little lady and you're doing it with such grace and you're not in pain. He's like, what is happening? And so I was like, meditation. And I'm explaining to him, it produces these chemicals that go into your
Mm.
nervous system. And he's super intrigued by it. And then after I recovered and after my surgery, he would go and lecture and he would use my case as a case
Oh, wow.
study to teach. And then he retired. But I thought it was, like I said, a lonely journey because I was forced to really, really tap into these tools that I taught people to use. Everything I'd been doing was preparing me for those moments.
Yeah.
And I think that happens when we talk about reclaiming ourselves. It's like, what are the things that we don't often pay attention to with us that are kind of our steady that we should be nurturing rather than just taking for granted? And what are the things that maybe we're scared that are a part of us? Um, that's part of too, like my 10-year anniversary that I'm going to do this photo shoot is that I grew up with all boys. And so I kind of always never really felt feminine. And that's been part of my journey in my 40s is like reclaiming or kind of not even reclaiming, but like stepping into that part of
Yes.
me that
Yeah.
has always been there, but I've never wanted to explore because a part of me was like, I I don't know how to do this. I didn't have girly stuff. I didn't do girly stuff growing up. And I have 2 boys. I have 2 sons, so it was never a part of my life either. But I do think that it's important that we face the parts of us that there's a duality with, right?
What you're saying definitely overlaps what I've heard with Dr. Is it Gabor or
Yeah,
Gab?
yeah, Gabor Mate. Yes, he's from Poland.
Right. I
Um,
thought he was French for
yeah.
some reason.
His story is that he, as a young child, was a survivor of the Holocaust.
Oh, right. Right. Okay. I see.
Yeah.
Oh, that explains a bit because I mean, I'm
And
relatively new to his work. So I've been binge reading and binge listening but I don't know all of his backstory yet. But it was interesting. I think one of the things that hooked me onto listening to him was a short thing I saw, a little reel someone had posted on Instagram where he was talking about something like 82% of people who get autoimmune conditions are women and how so much of it is related to suppressing anger, putting other people first, suppressing general emotions. And you're talking about autoimmune. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition this year. It's actually really changed my whole life in the last 18 months. That's on top of the fibromyalgia, chronic pain that I live with. So, that got me immediately going, okay, there's more to what I'm going through than just I feel sick here. And that's why I was so fascinated when I saw that you're coming on the show and your background. So I know I'm not alone. I know that there's many other women, due to whatever our environments, our backgrounds, whatever, who are suddenly switching on autoimmune disorders and diseases and things. And there are plenty of other people out there too living with chronic pain. So as someone who's been been through or kind of still manages both, what are some practical tips that you would give to somebody to start being able to like live again or get on the road
Yeah.
to thriving?
Oh, I laugh because as I'm hearing you ask the question, my mind immediately went to Deepak Chopra. And I remember one of the first courses I took from him, he tells a story of his mentor, and his mentor's answer to everything was meditate. When you acknowledge the pain and you learn to lean into the pain, all of a sudden it shrinks. And then you start to learn to be with yourself wherever you are in that moment. Maybe it's a great day, maybe it's a hard day, maybe it's a painful day, maybe it's a non-pain day, but you accept yourself. And that's part of meditating, right? Learning to be present with yourself and meeting yourself where you are. And that's going to look different every hour of the day and every day, but that's part of meditation, right? Is being present. So I definitely think learning to be present with yourself and trusting yourself. I think when we have pain, when we have autoimmune disorders, it's a mental game. Because for a long time, average diagnosis of an autoimmune disorder is years, years and years and years. MDs are trained to look for patterns and look for
Yes.
symptoms and
Yeah.
treat those pattern symptoms. And autoimmune disorders do not follow patterns.
No, they don't.
And
They're all
so,
over the show, aren't they? There's so many different aspects.
yeah. So, and everybody's autoimmune will present differently.
Hmm.
And have different cycles, right? Different times when you have flare-ups. So that's why it's a lonely journey. And the more you learn to love yourself and be with yourself and trust yourself, the more empowered you're going to be to do what you need for yourself. The other thing that I recommend for people going through autoimmune is prioritize, prioritize how much energy you have each day. That's also part of being present with yourself and meeting yourself where you are, because oftentimes with autoimmune and chronic pain, we have a limited amount of energy. And
Yes.
that's part of the struggle, right? Is that we can't do it all. And I think as women too, we want to do it all. Everybody wants to be superwoman, but that is a myth. And so we have to prioritize how much energy we have that day and what is the most important thing, and trying to just accept that that is what is best for you, and trusting that this is what's needed for you in this day, instead of always feeling not good enough, like you're falling behind, like your pain is keeping you back. Because I also want people to remember, even if people don't have autoimmune disorders, we all have things that we're working through. It could be a heartbreak, it could be a disappointment, it could be a conflict in your family or within yourself, but everybody's working through something. And so these tips work for everyone. And I think those three things are a process, and something that you have to practice and you have to commit to really trying to do. And then you start to learn what it is that you need. Some people need movement, some people need rest, some people need a little bit of both. So I think that is one of the most important things when we have chronic pain and autoimmune, is to just provide that space for grace for ourselves, because nobody can do it for you. I have a peer that says that, actually Gabriel Mate talks about this too, and he says, if your neighbor came and told you, I have cancer, you would cook a casserole and leave it on their porch. I'm sorry. Or comes to tell you, I can't make it today to our lunch or whatever because I have a flare up in my shoulder and my lupus. They're going to look at you. So,
It's lupus for me.
yeah, I have lupus too.
Yeah.
So, oftentimes I have a lot of clients that come to me, not necessarily to deal so much with their physical pain, but the mental game that comes with
Hmm.
it. And just dealing with that when it comes to autoimmune will trigger more pain if it thinks you're in danger. And if I'm sitting here thinking I'm not seen, I'm not heard, I'm not validated by the people around me, my shoulder is going to hurt more. So it is a very lonely journey. And that, I think, is the biggest lesson I came out with from my back surgery. I remember sitting one day and feeling like, it just sort of landed on me with this heaviness. And I was like, I have to do this by myself.
Yes.
And it was a relief, but also like this huge weight.
Yeah.
Relief to realize it because I kept wanting my husband to help me feel better. And he was like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I can't move your legs for you. And so I realized like he can't do it for me. He can't help me feel better. And then it was also like a big weight to carry because I had to learn to manage like how do I care for myself
Mm.
when I look, when I don't look like something is wrong. And I think that is where people tend to get depressed with autoimmune, that they feel kind of doomed because it's a constant. I mean, with lupus, like even if you feel fine, you still have to take precautions and have
Yes.
protocols because of flare up at any moment. And that's the other part of autoimmune. You never know when it's going to show up. So you're
Yes.
always kind of like waiting.
Yeah, basically, I've just been in a major flare all year from when they first discovered things. We've only known what it is this year. Although, interestingly, I had done my own research and I knew what it was before I finally got to a specialist. And you're right, it is a lonely thing. And because a lot of these autoimmune conditions are relatively unknown, as in the overall effect of them, how, like you said, how they drain your energy, let alone all the other things that can happen. It is quite lonely. I think the only obvious symptom I've got other than some blotching in my arms from my blood vessels is my huge steroid face that I really, really struggle with every time I get on a camera like this. But a friend sort of said midway through the year, like, listen, this is who you are now. Show up and do what you do. So that's what got me at least out of my bed, so to speak, and back into podcasting again. But it does mess with your head, and you do feel like you're constantly playing catch up because of the fatigue and because life is different. So how do you help people who are starting that process? Like, okay, I know I've got this terrible thing. I know that my body feels awful. You've given me some keys like meditate, meditate. But at the moment, I'm still feeling sad and I'm feeling robbed of life at the moment and I'm feeling self pity or whatever. How do you help people move that emotional state so that they can be more proactive then with their meditating and all the other things?
Yes, there's a grieving process. You're no longer going to be the person you were prior to knowing what was wrong, right? You're going to be a new cat. You're going to have to be a new person, and part of it is allowing yourself to be sad. Sadness has something to offer you that you need to allow yourself to feel, and part of what sadness offers us is the letting go, right?
Mm,
Sadness is to say there's something missing or something that I have to say goodbye to, or I need some sense of closure. And so allowing yourself to be with those stages is really important because if you don't, it will show up in your body.
yes.
I think that the really common thing that tends to happen to people that don't manage this grieving process of autoimmune or the process of having chronic pain because you get angry. And I still go through angry phases. I had one recently because I have a son who's 13 and I was talking to my brother casually. I didn't even know my son was listening. This was a couple weeks ago. And my brother and my son came in the room and he goes, Mom, I didn't know you had an autoimmune disease. Like, wow, that's so horrible. And now I understand why you go to bed so early. And I thought he was so little when I had my accident. He remembers, but he doesn't remember. He was
Yeah.
only 3. Um, and so I didn't realize that I hadn't had this full conversation with him, what is autoimmune. All he knows is mom goes to bed really early, but that's all he's known. And
Yes.
so in that moment, I felt guilt, I felt shame, I felt frustration. I felt, does my son feel like he doesn't have a mom after 8 p.m.? Because my energy literally, like, I've learned that after 8 p.m., I have nothing to give, is what I
Yeah.
call it. Like, I literally have, and my pain is so bad that I just have to
Yeah. Time to
be
check
with.
out. Yeah.
And so I thought that was a really telling situation because I did feel angry in the moment. And I realized that I wasn't angry at myself. I was just angry that this was my reality. but anger causes heat. And anger a lot of times causes us stomach problems when we have autoimmune disease if we don't move through the anger. So it's really important to ask strategic questions. Emotions are guidance signals of what we have to work through energetically. So I see it as like if you're turning on the water in your house and it comes out boiling hot, you need to figure out why the pipes are heating the water so much. Same thing, if you're turning on the water and it's super cold, like a depression, like a sadness, we need to figure out why, not just go, oh, well, I have hot water. Oh, well, I only have boiling water, which is what a lot of people do, right? They want to suppress or deny or run away from. That is going to make you feel worse. It's not going to help. So I encourage people, and that's part of what I start doing with people is let's explore how these things are showing up for you, whatever
Yeah.
it is, and how it's impacting your emotional and psychological well being. Because I've seen patients in my work in the hospital with the most dire of circumstances, having lost limbs, having been in a coma for 6 months, having lost all of their family members in a single car accident. And they were the only survivors. I have seen how mindset and attitude impact the person's well-being and their ability to heal and their ability to recover and move forward. And that is more impactful than any medication you can take or any rehab you can have or any infusion you can have for your autoimmune. Um, and so I really hope people understand that, right? That your thoughts and how you manage your emotions have everything to do with how we're going to feel.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back. There was a study that came out. I think you've known more than me. I'm sure it came out of World War II. It was either the prisoners of wars or the concentration camps. And one of the things they said was that the people hope, who kept hope inside, were the ones that tended to last longer and were more resilient to the horrendous surroundings, the horrible, horrible things they were going through.
Yes. So, I mean, I think every woman has heard of Pilates, right?
Yes,
So, Pilates is a great example of what you're talking about. It was created in a concentration camp. Think about this by
right.
someone that is starved, by someone that has no idea if they're going to live or not live. They
Hmm.
created the series of movements to move energy, to work with that angst, to work with that sense of doom and create positive emotions and positive sensations of I may not be able to do much, but I can create this positive environment behind my eyes and into my body.
Yes.
And so that I think is a great illustration of that. There's also in that study and in those stories of parents that played games with their children and their children never knew they were in concentration camps because the parents thought, how can we make this part of their learning experience? How can I make this part of what's happening now, right? And they played these games with their children and their children didn't experience the trauma that other kids did because the parents' approach and their attitude and their
Mm,
perception is not comfortable, but, kind of like if we said to our kid, like, "We're camping and we're playing this survival game,"
yes.
and so the kids that came out of that had a lot less trauma than the kids that experienced it for what it was, right?
Yes, yes. Isn't that incredible? Like, people are amazing.
It's
Just human spirit and
people are amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
people are amazing, and but that's the thing, right? Get in touch with your soul because
Mm,
your body your body is just like your car. It's telling you, "Get oil, more water,
yes.
change the brake," you know? But really, it's your soul that creates that resilience. It's your soul that says, "It can be a beautiful life even if I live with chronic pain. It can be a wonderful experience, even though my energy is limited." It also, to me, the gift of autoimmune is that it makes you value. So
Mm,
every day, this is something I do that's part of Ayurvedic medicine, actually. We all need lotion, especially as we age, because our skin gets dry. So after I take a shower, I do an Ayurvedic massage on my body with lotion. You start at the shoulders with circular motions and then move down through your heart and your arms. But I think, like, I literally talk to my body like you would to a plant. I'm like, thank you,
Right.
shoulders. Thank you, arms, for bringing what I need into my life. Thank you, stomach, for digesting the things that need to be digested. And I thank my body and I talk to my body because we know that if we talk to plants,
I
their
was thinking
cells change.
exactly that. You exactly that. Like, okay, this I've not heard this before, but
Yeah.
when you think about how plants
Yeah.
thrive, yes, makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
Wow.
absolutely. And I do exercises with patients in the hospital that were in a lot of pain. And we would shift their focus to parts of their body that were working and being grateful for that. And all of a sudden, you would ask them their pain level, and they'd be like, oh, it's now a 2. When we
Wow.
walked into the room, it was an 8, just by talking to your body and focusing on what is working. But just to shift your attention and I do notice a difference when I'm doing that because I'm tuning in, right, to everything my body does do for me. It might not do everything I needed to, lupus, but it does a lot for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, look, just as we start to wrap up, I mean, there's just been so much great information that you've shared with us, and I know that people are just going to appreciate hearing what you've had to say. Um, I know you talk a lot about self care, and looking after our well being. So, what would be like maybe one or two tips for someone who's listening in who may or may not actually have chronic pain or autoimmune or disease or injury, but they may just be somebody who's going through midlife, who's starting maybe to ache a little bit, maybe a touch of arthritis, or they're just not quite feeling themselves? What would you suggest for self care?
So self-care is should be, in my opinion, is as important as drinking water and eating food, right? We can't live without it. But your body is your biography. It's a reflection of your daily habits. And if you're putting importance on things that do not involve you feeling the best that you can feel, you are missing out on an opportunity to be the best that you can. And self-care doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be intricate or time consuming. It can just be little things like get out of the shower, thank your body, put lotion on it. Um, wear clothes that make you feel sexy and make you feel good, even if it's a day when you're just gonna stay home and watch movies. That's self-care, right? Making yourself feel the best that you can. Um, Choose to spend your time in ways that are nurturing for you. It
Mm,
could be reading a book. It could be touching the people that you love. It could be, um, just spending time and meditating instead of running an errand or doing laundry.
yeah,
Self
yeah.
care is really, am I doing everything that I can to nurture myself and feel the best that I can feel within whatever capacity you have that day. It doesn't have to be this hard thing to do. Now, of course, the more you do, get massages, all these things, the better you feel.
Yeah.
But it could be starting small. And oftentimes I've seen that just adding one thing that you can rely on, like the rubbing lotion on yourself and thanking yourself, like being grateful, just adding that one thing to your life can really change your day. It can change the way that you feel. And so to me, self care is like the magic recipe for having stability within yourself.
Oh, I like that. Oh, fantastic. Having stability within yourself. Oh, I think that's a great spot to end on. So, thank you so much. Well, where can listeners find you, Tatiana?
So you can find me on my website. I think the easiest thing to do is just to Google Tatiana Miller RX for Life. That's the name of my company. Or
We'll
I'm
have
not
all
a
the
big
links. We'll
social
have all
media.
the links here on the show notes. So, yes.
Yeah, that's not my strength, because I spend a lot of time doing other things, but
Yep.
yeah, so you reach out to me if you have questions. I love to be a resource for other people. That's the other thing that's super easy. when you're hurting, go help someone, go
Mm,
help a sheep, go pet your
yes.
dog, go do someone because that literally shifts the vibration inside of you. And then you're not feeling sorry for yourself. You're experiencing what it feels like to help somebody else. And that can be huge as well when it comes to pain management.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing I've always advocated as well. Just be a blessing to somebody else. And perfect, perfect note to finish on. So thank you again so much for joining us today. I know that, you've got some real gold in there. I think people are going to feel hope after listening to this episode, that no matter what they're facing, there is a way through it and to thrive in life, like you said, rather than just survive. So thank you so much again. And for listeners or people who are watching this on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe. But more importantly, share it out to other people in your life who may be struggling with certain health issues. And please leave us some comments too. Let us know what point really stood out to you, or what's really resonated in how you're feeling. Yeah, let's continue the conversation, because more and more and more people are being afflicted by autoimmune pain, all these different things that are happening. So let's talk about it more.